Yeah. Here's what I'm gonna do. We'll disconnect this.
No, I'll go get it. That's
No, we'll disconnect this, plug it into a laptop because she needs this to project onto those. I can do the meeting live from here. I don't need this. This just drives those two side monitors.
All right, well, let me go get my computer. I'm ready for it.
Thank you, Paul. You're saving the day.
I'm gonna have to find power for it too, the whole thing.
Right behind.
I can bring one up.
Yeah, it'll work.
I'll be back in 5.
Not 3,000, 200,000. That's where we want to be.
Don't mind if I put you on the other side.
She's staying with me.
Which is.
Yeah,
After a while.
that first 2 days is hard. She right now at the main thing. And this thing is video capture. Strange on what else we have to do is. I had been to the doctor. Weeks before this was
Yes, that
down
needs to
there.
change.
That's good.
We get into it.
Yeah, that's, I'm there. Well, we're at 27.
She's how much age? Oh, I got it.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. Metal review.
I'm gonna take it. Yes.
Like quality. That same thing. We live in society. We figured out how we're not living long, we're just dying. We should quality. That's all it is. They do everything, keep everybody alive. Again, I'm not arguing with euthanasia. Maybe it was big. No, but that was a pretty cool.
So
Did you have a choice?
It is.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
once we get less started.
Brenda, what'd you forget? Fred Jones, passed away recently. He has a heart valve replaced. I think it was an animal. When he was in his 50s. And they never replaced it. And it just kept going. Have you always had an issue with like genetic thing?
Okay. That's the problem.
Are you telling me I need to do
Like a hike a lot.
Careful with me.
Huh?
Just be careful.
With what?
Stepping over that side.
Oh, you can.
Oh, we got it.
We good? Okay.
Hey, Paul, did you bring the defibrillator? Is that, did you bring the?
He brought my defibrillator.
But twice more up that hill and I'm. I did come the director out straight up.
Let me see if I can get it for a second. Ooh, a little too much.
I can see that.
That's better.
Yeah, I can see it.
Fluorescence on the main one.
I felt it was here too. We're in the rugby hat instead of. He's talked to us.
That's what's challenging some of these grants, the same thing. So we should get it. That's what I know here today, but then it's started. Wow.
They got a hobby shop, model shops. I didn't know that. Dude, that dog, that'll be half my paycheck now. I do diorama, working on 2 museum pieces. They're low-end museums.
Now you want to be back on this?
But it's still fun. If I ever retire, that'll be do museums and commissions.
I can't imagine. You can't. That's what.
Excuse me.
It's the nature of the beast. Well, you know.
It's a good thing.
Same thing, can't find supply chain. It's not an excuse. Like you said.
What amazes me is that you can make a living doing that. Used to the only place you could work and make a living doing it had permanent staff at one thing.
Mr. Chair.
Or
Live.
with the movie studio. But now, the commission said, 3 or 4 right here. The pace it takes.
Turn on your web mics since we are live.
We saw them for 35 minutes. Yeah, good on you. Yeah, I get here, I get here. I mean, you're telling me.
Okay, I have 3 o'clock this time, and go ahead and call to order this budget work session for the Grayson County Board of Supervisors. At this time, I asked Mr. Smith, if you wouldn't mind to lead us in the invocation of the public work.
Father, thank you for the day that's been given. Thank you for all you do for us, for all the many blessings right here in Grayson County that we enjoy every day. We pray that you be with the board now in this budget session. May good decisions be made for our county. In your name we pray.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Prior to the approval of the agenda, I do have one additional item for the agenda, and I do apologize. I just got this request in about 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon. And this is a grant support request from the superintendent of the schools. Me and Mr. Boyer just found out about this yesterday, so I didn't want to sign any letter from the Board of Supervisors, which would be signed by myself, and I didn't want to do anything, any action without y'all's knowledge or giving you heads up what that is. And so I put this under a budget work session after public safety would be a grant support request from superintendent. If that's okay, and without any other additions, Chair would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Okay. Mr. Anderson, Mr. Freeman, assistant, went a little bit with motions. Okay, all,
Is there something popping?
Something is bothering me.
It's mine. Is that what it is?
it's on. Okay, so we have a motion, a second, any discussion? If there's no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Chair also aye. Okay, which brings us to first item on our agenda, presentations, Mr. Paul Holt and the Emergency Service Commission.
Good afternoon. Yes, please. We appreciate the opportunity to present the fiscal year 24 budget for Grayson County Emergency Services, which includes all the staff appropriation requests as well as our coverage for our volunteer agencies. And with the new software we have, the simplest way to do this instead of a PowerPoint is just to go line by line. I'll say that for the most part, the budget request this year was flat, except for a couple of items. Those are pretty significant items, so we'll address those as we go through. And the first of those items that represents a major increase or a significant increase in the budget request is we are asking for 2 additional ALS augment positions. It would be exactly the same as those that are currently filled by Philip Adams right now. Currently, we're covering 40 hours of the week. 2 additional positions would still not be enough for us to cover 24/7 for the county, but it will allow us to cover weekends, which is one of our greatest, especially the early parts of the weekend. Sorry about that. So that would give us a total of 120 hours of coverage. The hourly rate for that position and everything else on that position would be exactly the same as the position we approved last year for Philip the current, the filled by Philip Adams. And do we want to address any questions or comments as we go through, or you want me to go ahead and present through to the end and discuss it at that point? Okay. Once we get past the salary and benefits for those two positions, we did see an increase in the amount of load insurance coverage. That went up by I can't see it from here.
It's a zero.
That's
No
zero?
increase there.
Okay, so we haven't seen an increase in that, it's the other one.
Yes, the other one.
Workman's comp, the only change to the workman's comp as far as coverage was adding the Philip Adams position, who's staff. All the rest of it is based on the volunteer rosters that we currently have for active participants. And that one did result in,
We've readjusted that. So you'll see 1,000% increase, but that's really not a true increase. It's just realigning workers' comp where it needs to be.
So it's a change from last year.
It's a change, but not it's more of a realignment, not a true increase. More of a cleanup.
under professional services, we have had another year to collect data now. We've got some good data points on some of the things that we started covering for our volunteer agencies now. And I'll go ahead and kind of go through those. If you could expand the professional services there also, Lisa. Thank you. So the OMD is a new line item or a sub-line item under professional services. That's a $9,000. That's in addition to what last year's budget was. That is our operational medical director fee, and the Dr. Jason Edsel is our county operational medical director. And for that fee, he provides the service for our agency. He has also agreed for the same fee to cover all of our volunteer agencies so that they do not have to acquire an operational medical director and those associated fees on their own. He's made himself available for that. Several of our agencies have adopted him as the OMD. We did not make that a mandatory requirement. Some of the agencies are still keeping their own OMDs, and that's fine. In addition to providing medical oversight and direction for our agencies, he also provides training, quality assurance, even has provided leadership and management training for some of our senior folks. So he's very heavily engaged both within the county, within our agencies, and within the region as a whole. The Enforce 911. Yes, sir.
So is that the same as last year, the OMD, or is that?
We did not have an OMD last year because we weren't applying for the EMS licensure at that point. So this is a new requirement.
Okay.
The Enforce 911 line is for the county's internal security. That is basically our system that we can use similar to a panic alert. We have that installed on our desktop systems as well as our laptops and county phones, and for employees, they can also have it on their personal phones. It allows anyone to make a security alert from wherever they're at in a more rapid fashion than we were able to do under the old system with the physical panic buttons, which were very limited in the amount of coverage we had, a number of people that had them, and the back and forth communication. So we're about a little more than 25% complete with the training process for that, and that fee is flat. That has not changed. Data basics, we have a online database that we use for administering our logistics, our personnel our personnel management, our inventory, our fleet management. Basically, it covers all of the kind of the overhead administrative needs for our agencies. It gives them one place to go so they don't have to maintain a bunch of separate databases or spreadsheets. And it allows us to support them by giving them one place they can go. It also helps us from the administrative point. So instead of having to go to 9 different agencies for roster changes and things like that, now that's kept up to date in real time, and we can go ahead and pull that data beyond as we need it here. We've been using this as our I started that the first year I was here, so it's our third year, and the fee for that is actually down. We've completed all of the implementation on that, so that's a flat $4,000 per year now. The website hosting is new. That is our emergency services and our recruiting and retention website. That is essentially based on a $30 per month fee.
It's separate from what the county's
Yes, sir.
hosting is.
Yes, sir. At the time we were ready to go live, they were having some issues. And I was- I'm sorry, the information technology department. They advised me to go ahead and submit and do it this way until they get ready to bring it back into the county fold, if you will. So that one may or may not be there next year, but we need it for this year. The communication engineering study, requesting $25,000 for the engineering study that I've been requested to do for the Point Lookout communications tower. I've talked to 3 different firms, and we don't have final bids yet, but all of them are talking in the order between $20,000 and $25,000 to get that assessment done, whichever one of them ends up selecting.
Are there other towers? I know the Point Lookout one has got a lot of attention, but are there other towers, if we're spending the money for an assessment to bring the folks here, is there other towers that the county owns that need to be assessed also as part of that?
That is actually the only tower that the county owns. So every other tower, we're co-located with someone else. A couple of the agencies, Freeze has a small tower, Rugby has an independent tower, but they're owned by the agency. And right now, they have already been evaluated as part of the ongoing radio upgrade project.
They have been.
They've been evaluated to the extent that they know that they need to come onto a different site. So neither one of those will be part of the new system, simply because they're not big enough.
Is there tower evaluations in the federal study?
Not formal tower evaluations. They made some recommendations and gave us some guidance. And that's one of the reasons that we requested a Point Lookout evaluation, because they had pretty serious concerns about both the loading and possible engineering or substructure analysis for that tower.
Just so I'm clear, and Randy, I may, if it's okay with the chair, ask you to comment. The tower in Freeze, it's been assessed as part of this study is what you're saying, Paul, the 911 commission with the new radio system, that tower has been assessed. Is that what you said?
Yes, sir. So they looked at that site, and they didn't really look at the tower per se. They looked at the site to see if that site
The site is not good.
the site is not appropriate for the new system.
So if the site's no good, then that means we gotta have another tower somewhere.
Or there have actually been a couple of towers that are removed from the current rotation. So right now, the Freeze coverage will be primarily from the US Cellular tower that we're already on. And frankly, Randy, tell me if I'm off base here, but I don't think that the Freeze tower is part of the county's or the regional system right now. It's used locally for a talk around and
Yeah, it's a work channel, plus it is also a channel that it combines with from Point Lookout to be able to send out the information from Point Lookout to that tower. And it was basically put in place to be able to hit Rush Creek and Ivanhoe area down that way. It's at Perry Claverin's residence in his barn, and it's just an antenna on a pole outside his building, and it's got a 25-watt repeater hooked to it, and that's basically what it is. But anybody down there, when it was put up, Bobby Jones was the police officer in town, and he didn't have. There was a lot of places where his coverage wasn't good to be able to get back to the sheriff's department. And it was used by him also to be able to get back to the sheriff's office. I think the deputies had access to it at one time.
One time, I think they did.
But not now, I don't think.
But if we have to put the equipment on a different tower, on the US Cellular tower, does that tower pole, is it still needed where it is? Would it still serve a function at all? Or do we know?
I don't know what the coverage area for the cell tower, repeater is going back towards Brush Creek and Ivanhoe from that cell tower across the river there. That's when we were talking about it.
Well, not to belabor this, but the point being that if we're bringing in engineers to look at towers, if there's other towers, let's just say for the sake of discussion, for ease of volume, that need to be assessed on feasibility of repurpose or use, then should that be included as part of the look if they're already going to be here? That's my only question. I don't need an answer necessarily. It's just something to think about. So.
Yes, sir. And I can address that separately via email or something like that if you'd like.
Yeah, I just, if we're gonna budget the item, and I understand we need to look at the point lookout tower, but if we're gonna spend that kind of money to get here to do an assessment, if there's other ones that we can do that might save us a little bit of money in the future, is all, I guess.
Understand. I'll take a look at it and I'll take it through.
Especially if we're thinking about repurposing them. It doesn't sound like the one that's there makes sense to move if it's just, you know, basically a small pole. Anyway, okay.
All right, the next item is a new proposal that we're putting forth this year. We are working with the town of Freeze in particular, but it's really going to be countywide. Pulse Point is a application on your cellular phone. It's also web-based that allows us to better respond to sudden cardiac arrest in our communities. So right now, if just to give you an example, if somebody in the parking lot here goes into cardiac arrest, none of us will know about it, something more when we read about it. Pulse Point application is a system that's designed so that we can register our responders. They can self-register, we don't mandate it, other than county employees or the department, but it allows us to register anyone who is CPR trained. They self-register. It also allows us to register all of our AEDs, our automated external defibrillators, where they're at, and how to get access to them. So if something like that happens, then what would happen under the Pulse Point app is I would get a text. I'd actually get an alert similar to the Amber Alert that would tell me that there's a cardiac arrest in progress, would tell me where it's at, and it would also tell me where the AED is, up to and including having a picture of where it's mounted. So it allows us as responders, but it also allows any citizen who's CPR trained and registered would also receive that alert if that alert is in a public area. Now it does limit information for personal or private residences to people who are under county employee or volunteer agencies. So a citizen responder would not get an alert for something that happened in someone's home, but our county employees, myself and Philip, and any of our volunteer agencies who are EMS providers and qualified to provide that service would receive it. So what it does, it doesn't replace the 911 communication at all, but it allows us to respond much more quickly, and it allows us to have a citizen response before emergency services gets on scene. So a good example of the way this works in a perfect world was an incident we had this summer at the school. Where we registered in Pulse Point, and everybody within a radius of that school that we determined, we set, would receive a notification that someone went into cardiac arrest there, and would allow any of us who are qualified to assist in that to drop what we're doing, go respond, and provide emergency medical care, CPR, to that individual until the regular emergency services folks get there. Paul. Yes, sir.
Question. Okay, this is interesting, and one comment is, what about our deputies? Is this gonna be on their phones, or if they were out in the county and they got that and their CPR, our deputies CPR?
Oh, then yes,
There you go.
if they're registered and they're county employees, we can have them registered. And that does put a lot more people in the community who are more quickly able to respond. Our rollout for this is on June 10th right now. That date is not 100% firm, but I would say we're probably at 90%.
Is it restricted to county employees?
No, it's anyone who's CPR qualified can self-register for it. As we do our CPR, our community CPR training throughout the year, one of the things we'll do is give them the opportunity to register. We'll give them educational materials on the program and ask that they register themselves.
So they don't have to be in for.
No,
I heard that.
we can mandate it for employees if we choose to. But the real value is in voluntary participation by our citizenry.
Because we got a lot of nurses and physicians that say everything in Grayson County. My wife's a nurse and she just got CPR certified, recertified again. So,
Well, you said that if there's someone in distress, you'd get a text. So how would the citizenry know that there's someone in distress, like I'm CPR certified, somebody down the street, and I'm just a citizen?
Then you would get an alert on your phone. It's an emergency alert, so it's got its own tone, if you will, so you know that it's a pulse point. And you just put it up. It doesn't tell you doesn't give you any personal information, any information on that call other than that there's a pulse point alert. So that if your phone's sitting on a desk, nobody else is going to get any information on it. But if you tap on it and open your phone, then you'll get the location of where the alert's at and all that other information we're talking about. Location of AEDs and any other supporting information you need.
Okay.
So it gives you what you need to be able to respond to that.
How's the alert generated?
It's a cellular alert. It's tied in with our computer-aided dispatch system 911 center. It's an API function of the 911 dispatch. And it does not require any extra work by the dispatchers. It's automatic. It's integrated into the cardiac arrest protocol so that as soon as they have a unresponsive patient, it automatically will tone for the pulse point alert then.
Can I?
Yeah, I don't understand how the alert goes off.
If you are at a store where the AED is and you encounter somebody that has went down and needs CPR and you get the AED off of the wall, that's when you get the alert sent, right?
Well, that's a different function. That's a function of the AED storage that we're going to be using. But
Who alerts the pulse?
so
How is the system alerted that somebody's
it's
going?
secondary to the 911 call. So whoever calls 911, that's what initiates the process.
Gotcha. Okay.
No, it does not bypass 911. We wouldn't want it to.
So the 911 call is what generates the alert.
As soon as the 911 operator recognizes it's cardiac arrest or a potential cardiac arrest, and they enter that code into the response for the EMS responders, then it automatically notifies pulse point and I don't know.
Yeah, that's all.
so you could have a citizen in the community, a deputy, and 2 or 3 more to show up to that one.
In a perfect world, we got people doing CPR and they've already shocked the patient before we get there. That's what we need. Community CPR.
Concern I have is I fall over next to my tractor. I'm screwed because I got no cell phone coverage. I got nothing to alert the system. I mean, it works if somebody is there, but it doesn't work. No change really for people that are out there doing their own thing.
It's net improvement. You're right. It's not going to help anybody that's not within cellular coverage.
Another argument for our cell phone efforts.
Now, I will say this: you may not have cell phone coverage where you're at, where you drop, but somebody called 911. The alert's still going to go out.
It's got to get to the 911 system.
So as soon as it gets to 911, then it will still work, and so it can still speed a response to you. It's just not going to be somebody sitting in the field with you.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
The $18,000, is that to buy hardware, so dispatch or software?
It's broken into 2 parts. There's a $10,000 implementation fee. Okay, that puts us online, and $8,000 is annual sustainment fee, if you will. And I also want to mention that we have already started talking to our other stakeholders for regions that are below a 50,000 person threshold. The system is based on the dispatch, or dispatch center, not on the jurisdiction. So because Carroll County, Grayson County, and the city of Galax all together, the aggregate is still below 50,000, This is actually gonna make this available for all 3 jurisdictions, and they do not, it's only a one-time fee. Right now, our plan is to go ahead and request this under a regional grant through the Twin County Community Foundation. We feel pretty good that it's gonna be covered, in which case this would be returned back to, it wouldn't be spent. Because that would be a regional funding approach, and it's right down the TCCF alley for that.
That number's not on Carol and Alexi's budget.
No, it's not. But the second item to get it implemented, we want it as part of our process this year so we can do our community CPR push. For next year, my intention is and I would talk to Supervisor Hash yet, but one of the things that I intend to do is present this to the Twin County 911 Commission and request that the $8,000 sustainment fee in the future would be coming under that direct fund instead of the jurisdictional funds for any of the 3. So this is just to get us rolling, and then the longer term sustainment plan is to cover it under a regional approach.
So as far as with your partnership with Freeze, is that just for the AEDs that trigger this? Because it'll work all over the county, right?
Yes, we can actually implement this. This part will be countywide, region-wide, really. The push for the community CPR and Freeze is more limited because of, well, there's several reasons. Part of it's just the amount of effort that's needed to push it out. So we wanted to pick one community and focus a lot of effort there. Next year, we're going to pick a different community, and we're going to continue that until we've got the entire county covered. A good portion of what we were talking about, though, the funding in particular that's coming from citizen sources is going to be for AEDs to cover the community freeze. And we will continue as we push this out through the county to look at, again, funding sources to put more AEDs. As part of this push, the AEDs that we're putting on the street are not going to be in buildings. They're going to be outside. They're going to be available to anyone 24 hours a day. So they're going to be put where they're publicly available, whether a business is open or closed, or whether the government offices are open or closed. So they'll be mounted on the outside in an environmentally protected and secure enclosure. And one of the things Randy was talking about there is we have the ability to establish these enclosures. So if somebody opens it, it automatically sends an alert to 911 center so that they can dispatch to it, which also helps protect us from theft or things like that, and allows us to start an EMS response. So if we get somebody opens a defibrillator cabinet, we can assume that we have a cardiac arrest call there, and it starts the ball rolling on that. Even if we haven't got a phone call yet, we can start moving in that direction and moving forward.
So is this the only part of your budget that has AEDs, anything that addresses AEDs?
Yes, for this year. We've got 6 in this year's budget that we're purchasing. But the AEDs that we're buying as a part of this push are being funded through the community, not through the county.
So I think maybe you mentioned the sheriff's department has some in the cars, but not all cars equipped. Are we going to move toward having all the cars equipped?
We have had a preliminary discussion with the sheriff on that, and we have not taken it to any conclusion yet. And I'm not sure what the status. I don't know how many vehicles right now we have with AEDs.
There's 4 or 5, I think.
Out of 12?
The goal would be, my goal at least, in partnership with the sheriff's office, and I don't want to throw them under the bus, but we would like to see them in every vehicle. Even if a deputy shows up who's not qualified to do CPR, he's got an AED, he shows up, and somebody would at least have an opportunity for somebody else to use it.
It's the cost of AED.
AEDs, they vary a lot, like everything. The
Well, that'll save.
$750. That's what we're looking at for the community AEDs. The ones we have in the county buildings are a little more expensive, but they're connected to Wi-Fi and they do some other things for us.
CPR is required for all the deputies, correct? So AED training is part of CPR training. So I think it would be good if we could get them in all the cars. I mentioned that to the sheriff.
We talked at the administration level too. We're going to be doing a large push for all county employees. Will have the opportunity to receive CPR training also, whether they're emergency services or public works. It doesn't matter. Anybody can do this stuff.
Gary, I know you're not the sheriff, but is there resistance, and that's not, I'm not mean that in a bad way, what's the obstacles to putting them in each car? Is it purely a budgetary thing?
That's the biggest thing.
There are grant funds available for this process too. And Twin County Community Foundation, it's right down their alley. That's exactly the kind of projects that they look for. So there are some, we may be able to provide some help as far as acquiring AEDs.
You got them in 4 and you got 12 patrols?
Yeah.
You know what you said? So you got 8 vehicles, what's it cost us? We're less than $8,000, right?
Yeah, you could easily do it for seven and a half.
I think cost was the obstacle.
Yeah,
The sheriff said.
Yeah, okay.
And he seemed like he wanted them, and at least my impression was he wanted them all as much as we could afford them.
I'm sure it's in his budget.
It may be now.
It's an aside to this because it's actually under the 23 budget. We just put in our grant request for 6 of them for county facilities. We'll have one at Public Works, we'll have one at the Gate Center. Parks and Rec will have 4. So that's gonna expand our ability quite a bit also. Next.
I didn't drink out of it, by the way.
I've had worse experience. Pulse Point in community CPR is going to make a huge difference. We're a rural community. Pulse Point was invented and set up initially in metro areas. It works well there, cellular coverage, lots of people. For us, the benefit, even though we are smaller, we have fewer people, we have longer response times. So if we can get a member of the public to start CPR immediately and apply an AED as soon as it's practical, then we are going to see an increase in the number of lives that we save. We know that if you wait for us to show up on scene, the odds of survival for a cardiac arrest event are less than 1 in 10. For witnessed cardiac arrest, where somebody sees it happen and immediately starts community CPR and immediately, or as soon as practical, applies an AED, we see those numbers go up between 30 and 40%. So that's a huge difference. It's not a huge difference in numbers for our population because we don't have a huge number of cardiac arrests, but for any family, and I use our young gentleman in the school system, that's one win, but it's a huge win. And I think that $18,000 is a small amount to give everybody else in the community that same fair shake, if you will. And yeah, John, we know that communications is a challenge. We'll continue to work on that. Sorry. It's a step. Can I answer any other questions on that part?
I would just encourage, if this is approved, that we, for everyone that we CPR train, that we make a requirement, but that we strongly encourage them to sign up for this system so they can participate.
Certainly we can do that, especially for employees. It's much easier. For citizens, we
Sure.
work on their good intentions. And most people do. Most people will. All right. Let's see, where am I at?
Back up, occupational health.
Occupational health. So we had several conversations over the last year about improving the benefits we have for our volunteer responders. And there's, quite frankly, a lot of rules and there's a lot of, it's a challenging process. One of the things we found that we can do that would help them, it would help the agencies, it would help the individuals that are volunteering in the agencies, is by providing a medical physical that meets the OSHA requirements for all of our responders that are actually riding trucks. We have 2 categories of responders. We have those who are fighting fire. They basically need to be able to have a physical for a forced air respirator, which is where SCBA is, or self-contained breathing apparatus. And it also provides a general medical physical for our medical personnel and our staff personnel who are supporting. I'll give you just an example for that. The OSHA fee for someone who's found in violation, that if we have somebody who can OSHA came in. If we have an injury, first of all, OSHA's coming. They don't wait for us to call. They're gonna show up. And if they find out that we have somebody wearing a respirator who hasn't had a physical, that's a $15,000 per person, per event, per day fee. That's right now around on the shoulders of our volunteer agencies. So providing this physical would actually give them coverage for that. And it's also just the right thing to do for our volunteers. It gives them, we haven't at this point been able to provide medical coverage for them, but we can provide a physical that will give them early warning of certain problems. For those over 55, it also give them cardiac evaluation, and there are a couple other small categories. We've talked to several providers for this. There's only one local provider. They're in Whitfield Occupational Health Facility there. And they were able to put together a package for us that basically meets our needs.
Just so I'm straight, so you're under Department of Forestry is where the incentives are?
I'm sorry, I'm on occupational health right above it.
Here, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry
So
about that.
the request is 75,000. And the line you're talking about for the physicals is what?
That is the occupational.
So 75K is the ask
That's
for
the,
this incentive.
that would give us physicals for everybody who's currently active as a volunteer.
What number is that?
75,000. Oh, the number is approximately 2,200.
200?
There is some duplication in that. It would actually be somewhat smaller than that because we do have people who are working or volunteering in more than one agency. So obviously they're only going to get one physical. So when you look at that duplication, it's probably going to drop it by 25 or 30. But I just went by the raw rosters to get a kind of a worst case number for it.
So who would be doing the physicals?
The occupational health company that we contract with, we'd have to bid it out. Also, just as a point, the county would be paying for the physical. These are not county employees, so the information from that physical wouldn't come back to the county. That would go to the individual, and then they would take it to their agency because they're the ones that have the policies on what they're going to do with it. That would not put us in a position where we're going to tell somebody that they're no longer able to volunteer because of whatever shows up on a physical. That's outside the scope of our authority. But it does give the agency more information.
So, a couple of questions. One, are the volunteers required to have a physical every year?
There is no requirement for medical personnel, other than if they wear any kind of a mask, then they have to be fit tested for it. And we provide that service for non-forced air respirators. For anyone, regardless of what their employment is or what type of work they do, if they wear a forced air respirator, OSHA does require a respiratory physical annually.
Do our volunteers have physicals on file in Grayson County right now
Not with us. That was
with their
cannot do that.
agency?
I do not know. I have not asked that question.
In the past, how many years has OSHA come in and inspected every agency?
They don't do that, but if we ever had an event where somebody was hurt or suffered an injury, the first thing they will do is they will come in. And they will
Second question, is that the entire incentive package for the volunteers that you're suggesting that we've been talking about? An incentive for recruitment and retention number of volunteers, is that?
That's for this year, yes.
And that's the only incentive we're talking about is paying for the physical?
So we looked at a retirement program, the VOSAP program, which is managed by the Virginia Retirement System. And we had multiple discussions, but the last one, they had their counsel on the call with us. And the determination is there were 3 points that came out of it. One is the county can actually be the administering agency for that program. Because my proposal at that point was, and Supervisor Fent and I discussed this, that we basically pay the retirement premium for the individuals, all of it, which is 3 quarterly payments that have been $1,800 a year per individual. We can do that. legally. The other thing that we weren't sure of was whether the individual had to actually provide some premium themselves, if you will, some kind of buy-in. And it was determined that that was not necessarily, so at that point, everything was looking good. But the final point was the one that got us, and that basically stated that if we offer it to anybody who's on a roster for an agency, we have to offer it to everyone. We can put no conditions on the benefit. So all of our agencies, I don't know of any of our agencies who are not carrying people on their roster who are not active providers. So we have life members, we have associate members, we have lots of categories of people. And under the, and this is out of Virginia State Code, it's not a regulated, it's state code. If all of those people would receive the benefit, if any of them.
Okay, but just to be clear for me, $75,000 in occupational health, that is the total incentive package that you have come up with to incentivize our volunteers by paying for their annual physical.
That's the total I've come up with. It's in addition to what we've done for the last 2 years. Yes. We're paying over $200,000 for their insurance. We pay their line of duty insurance. We pay all of their training costs. We have a lot of benefits that we pay for and have been since I got here. This is the only addition, and again, that's because the BOS kind of fell apart. We are actively seeking out other opportunities, but this is what I've got for this presentation.
Just so I'm clear, did the commission, I know this is maybe targeted at the rescue folks because they tend to have a bigger challenge, but did the commission say, yeah, that's the incentive that we want to go forward with, or is that your?
This is just for me digging. This is what I found. It meets a need that is currently not being met, and it's my
But
friend.
it ain't necessarily what somebody would want to get them to sign up to be a firefighter or a rescue person.
No,
I didn't sign up for the Army so I could go get a physical.
understand.
Okay.
The benefits for the volunteers is a continuing process. It is more difficult than I had thought it would be, and we're continuing to work on it. We may be able to come up with a way to do retirement, but it's going to require changes. The agencies, the individual agencies, would have to change their bylaws.
Paul, just so we're clear, that the retirement was one idea. I mean, we talked about personal property relief, vehicle tax relief, or healthcare. There's several things that we have thrown out as ideas. And I guess, but I'm not a volunteer. I'm not the target audience to be recruited to be, in the agency. So I guess we've got a problem. What we're trying to do is figure out how do we get people that currently aren't in the system to get into the system and volunteer in the communities. And that's kind of where my head is what incentives are attractive to that demographic that we're trying to get in there so that our average age of rescue is currently over 60, gets dropped below that. That's kind of where I think, at least I was thinking we were headed with the incentive.
Can I say something, Mr. Chair? Not trying to take us too far over in the weeds, but like, for example, if you had a survey or something among the commission that gives some feedback to what they think would be good incentives for the volunteers. I know you've identified a need and maybe a little snafu there with this, but it'd be good to hear like what those guys on the ground think would be. Would it be, waiving and giving them a discount on tax or whatever it is that's been thrown around? Or do you have any sense of that?
So it's a continuing process. This is the only one that's come to fruition where I could actually put numbers on the table. The vehicle issue, the vehicle relief, that is actually on here, and that is currently, my understanding is that's with our county attorney for review. But it is, again, it's not at the point where we're able to put a budget recommendation on there. We have talked about it at multiple commission meetings, and just when we sit down and put our heads together, we talk about different things, and we continue to do that. It might be something that we need to get to the commission and put together a working group and kind of formalize that process again. And I agree, nobody's gonna join the fire department for a physical.
Matter of fact, they might not join because they have to take physical. I mean, to me, that's a disincentive if it's anything.
It's a possibility. I'm a strong proponent of annual physicals. I've had very close friends of mine who did their annual physical and found 90% blockages. And
I get the benefits of a physical, Paul, but you do recognize that that is not an incentive for somebody to want to join and volunteer.
I agree. It does take care of the folks that we already have, though.
I'll tell you, so what I'm, sorry.
Yes.
What I'm hearing is that we need to get together and come up with what the volunteers would see advantageous to them as far as recruitment or retention and potential recruitment. Then we need to run those to ground and have some answers as to cost and what the real possibilities are. Some of these things, I don't know if we can do legally or not. That's what I've heard earlier today. But I think it sounds like we owe you an answer before we decide on some of these things. Is that fair? Okay.
Thanks, sir. If we're ready for the next line item, ambulance service is our annual payment to Galax Grayson EMS for the coverage they provide to the county. And that is an increase over last year, and that's based on current volumes and rates. The Department of Forestry line is flat. There's no anticipated change in that. That is providing compensation for the wildfire coverage they give to the county. I will say that we pretty much wear them out for that amount.
But that's what we charge them, or is that a revenue?
No,
That's an expenditure.
It is an expense.
What are we paying the Department of Forestry to do?
That is for wildfire protection.
We're paying them a
Yes.
fee for wildfire protection,
Yes.
and
For
then
the
we go
support
put
that
out
they
the fire.
provide. They provide the heavy equipment. Right, guys?
yeah.
I got that, I understand.
Is that common that localities, counties would have to contribute
It's
to
normal.
the?
Even in the cities, believe it or not, there's a forestry fee.
They give us back payment of little taxes.
Good point.
On any timber that's harvested. That's not every year, but it is every whenever timber is harvested.
Which is about it.
Okay, here, this is not used, if I may jump in front of you, Paul. This is cleanup of that workers' comp a little while ago. You see 50,000 was in the FY23 budget, and that's been moved up to workers' comp under professional services above. Okay, sorry.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. The communications, can you go ahead and expand on it for me?
Mm-hmm.
So what we're doing starting this year, before this was all lumped together, we're gonna go ahead and budget for the infrastructure, which is the tower itself and the facility that holds our equipment. And that has been a moving target. Quite frankly, we've had much more than that in emergent repairs in the past. We do have a lot of that taken care of now, unless something else major breaks. We have another lightning strike. But this will allow us to support the regional radio technician as he's supporting our equipment. And we don't know what it's gonna cost.
So that's really sustainment.
It's a
is what it
sustainment,
is.
that's what it is.
Sustainment for
Maintenance
that
and
tower,
sustainment.
the existing tower.
And then the second sub-item under that, the system equipment, that's the electronics. That's the stuff that actually makes the radio system work. And it's the same thing. That would be our antennas, our repeaters, and the voters and all that other.
And regardless, when the new system is fielded, that number, not to show the exact number, but that line item will remain because we have to sustain it.
What we expect to happen, and it's not final yet, it has been presented to the jurisdictions as a final option, if you will, or what we anticipate is that will come out of the Twin County 911 ask, and it would just be a communications
Be part of
ask
that
into
regional.
that, which would zero it out of the operations budget.
Move it to the
But
911.
they would move it, yeah, we would get rid of it. But we do anticipate that the emergency repairs will go way down. If you can go ahead and expand the next item. Vehicle maintenance.
But on that, to your point though, Paul, that if we build more towers as part of the broadband cellular stuff, that number may not go down because they may not be owned by the 911, they may be owned by the county, depending on what comes out of it. And even if it's a US Cellular or Verizon tower, equipment on there will probably still need to be sustained by something. So that doesn't change anything about this budget. I'm just saying that I don't know that we're gonna look at a substantial reduction in that number because we may actually have more towers that need to be maintained. Anyway, it's probably an editorial more than anything. Okay.
Vehicle maintenance, it's just covering routine maintenance for my vehicle and the new quick response vehicle, which should be arriving anytime now. And that's just extrapolated from the maintenance for last year from on. Recruiting and retention is a flat ask. We spent a little bit more than $5,000 last year, but we had to buy a lot of equipment. We bought the pop-up that we're using for our events and the stuff to support that. We did quite a bit of printing last year. Some of that will be repetitive, but most of it, a lot of it's covered now. So that basically leaves that 5,000 clean. The only major change we've got, or major program we've got that we didn't have last year that's going to come out of that will be the public safety camp, which will draw some of that, and then the rest of it we will use for other projects that we're working on. The Galax Fire Department is fire coverage for the East End. They are, excuse me, the last year's request was 24,000. They submitted a request this year for 30,000. I did an analysis based on call volumes, which were up. They did cover more calls this year in Grayson County. I tapped it as a $3,000 increase instead of a $6,000 increase to better reflect the actual change in volume they provide.
Yes, sir. You have a sense of how many calls the Galax Fire Department went on in Grayson County?
I did. I mean, I have the exact numbers. I don't remember them off the top of my head. I would be happy to provide that offline.
Is it around 60 something?
It's on a monthly basis. It runs. Seems like it's running about 30 to 35 a month on a monthly basis. So they cover quite a bit of the east end of the county, all through Baywood, Old Town, Fairview. So it's actually one of our larger response areas that they're providing coverage. The EMS council line is 2,200. That's flat. That's basically supporting our EMS council that provides support and guidance to us in many different ways. They actually earn that quite handily. But probably the biggest push is their support for training, their support for our quality assurance programs, our medical direction and our grant reviewing. So operational expense or operating expenses category, if you don't mind, can you expand that telecommunications for me? So we broke this down into the all the different telecommunications categories. This is the first time we've had this level of data. The Telzio is the county's emergency helpline. We use that for our citizens to have one number they can call if they have a problem that they need assistance with. Primarily, it's used for people that are having some kind of financial distress, and we're trying to get them plugged into the appropriate resource We also used it a lot during COVID. It was set up during COVID. It's quite frankly not used a lot. Now it's kind of flattened out. But if we stop it and then we have a major event, we have to restart it again. So for the amount of money it is, to me, it's beneficial to keep it going. And we still do receive calls on occasion, even when there's nothing major going on. That helpline is published on our website. It's available with all of our stakeholder agencies also, so that they know that they can refer people to it. The cell phones is for coverage for my phone, for the ALS augment position that we have right now, and for the 2 positions that we have asked for. That would be for phone coverage. The Active 911 is another project that we have been working on for the volunteer agencies. Right now, all of them have their own mechanism for alerting their agencies. This is basically a paging system. And it was requested last year, and we're just now getting the final quotes and everything from the company. We're going to go ahead and pick up that contract for the agencies, and they would all be under the same umbrella then. They would also provide Active 911 for 2 agencies who currently don't have a system in place at all. Let's see, satellite phone service is we have 4 satellite phones that are staged in the west end of the county with our agencies, so that they, at a minimum, have at least one method of communications when they don't have any radio coverage or cellular coverage or any other mechanism for communications. And we also use those to support the election board. So for our elections, we put those satellite phones in the precincts in the west end for the same reason. The telehealth is a placeholder. We don't anticipate anything in that. The cardiac monitors we use talk to the hospital. So if we do a 12 lead on someone, or we do other diagnostic testing, that allows us to transmit that information to the hospital immediately, assuming cell coverage, which allows them to speed up the process and bypass some of the initial things that would normally hold somebody in the emergency department. That's really important for our cardiac people with that are suffering cardiac events, heart attacks, and it's very important for people who are suffering strokes. So that's allows them to skip some of the things that would keep them in the emergency room for 30 or 40 minutes and bypass them and go directly to the specialist facility that they need. The insurance is basically all of our vehicle and facility insurance for our volunteer agencies. That is everything except LODA and workman's comp. So we provide the insurance for all of their apparatus, all of their equipment that is expensive enough to warrant coverage, and it covers their facilities. Let's see, the travel that's a funding line for staff travel for training purposes, conference attendance, and things like that. We have been below. I don't want to keep it on there because as we need employees, or as we add employees, I want to keep the opportunity to send them to training in various places. The training is also for staff training, and that's broken down to emergency services staff training, and we also provide the training for the rapid response team for hazardous materials for the county. That covers their training.
Where's for the training that like Jim Barn does, where's that cost that we pay?
That's coming down. So if we look at the training for volunteers, that is where we pay our EMT instructors. We can pay fire instructors. We haven't had to do that. We've been able to do those as either funded through the state or what we call help me out here, Randy. Non-funded, which just means we have a qualified instructor that volunteers their time. We just finished an EVOC class this weekend. There was a non-funded class. 20 students completed. The training for the public is supporting our, primarily supporting our community CPR training. That's what we're using that for. We can use it for any other public training. But again, our push right now is community CPR. That's the best bang for our buck. Local support, we have broken this down a little bit. So last year, we got the budget approved for reimbursing the agencies on a per call basis based on the amount that we were paying Galax Grayson EMS for the EMS side and what we were paying Galax Fire for the fire side. And we did that over basically a 3-year running average. What we determined, what the board approved last year, was that we would go ahead and take any fixed contract costs or things like that out of the front end of that, and then we would distribute whatever's left of that to the agencies on a quarterly basis, dividing it up so that we could cover the contract costs throughout the year. We've got better data now. We still don't have all the data we need, and we're adding centralized contracts, so this will reflect some of that. Vehicle maintenance for fire apparatus, we budgeted at $25,000. We gathered information last year for fire apparatus maintenance, but 1 year doesn't really give you a good strong picture. We need a 3 or 4 year running average to have a better idea how much it's going to cost us on an annual basis. So we put 25,000 in there. We didn't quite spend 25,000 last year, but I just feel like it's a reasonable starting place as we continue to develop that data point. The pump hose and ladder testing is something we haven't provided in the past, and we're not asking for a budget line on it, but we are keeping track of it starting now so that in the future budget lines, we will actually budget an amount in there. And that basically covers pump testing for all of our fire apparatus. It also covers the testing that's required for our ground ladders and for our hoses and basically everything else that's got to be certified on an annual basis. The other one, and this one's an important one too, because this is also a liability with OSHA if we get on the wrong side of it. The forced air respirators that we use, the self-contained breathing apparatus, are required to be checked annually by a certified technician, which means that we have to have someone come in from the outside to do that. Up till this year, that was always, well, it's still done. Agencies basically contract that, request somebody to come in and do it. What we are working with right now is a contractor to come in and take care of it under one contract. They would take care of all of our air packs for all of our agencies throughout the county, which would give us a pretty substantial, or at least it looks like it's going to be a substantial savings based on cost efficiencies. And then the compensable reimbursement is everything that's left. That's the amount of money that's left based on the number of calls that the agency responds to, paid at the same rate that we're paying the Galax Fire Department in this case. The local support for rescue is the same model, so we have different contracting requirements. The oxygen service is an annual contract. Grayson County now covering oxygen for the entire county. We only paid $6,000 for, and that's actually extrapolated out through the end of the year, $6,000 for oxygen this year. Last year, we had one agency that was paying more than $6,000. So it looks like we've saved approximately $12,000 for our agencies for their oxygen fees. And that's only out of 5 agencies. So that's pretty substantial change. The vehicle maintenance is the same as it was for fire apparatus, except this is going to be for ambulances. The striker maintenance contract is a contract that's going to cover several items that we call it the striker contract because that's the company that owns or that manufactures all this equipment. The cardiac monitors have to be serviced regularly on an annual basis. Our AEDs have to be serviced. The Lucas devices that we use for automated chest compressions, the cardiac monitors, our stretchers, the power load stretchers, and the system that supports them, all of those are striker tools. And 3 of those are more than $40,000 per unit, new cost. So the ability to support the agencies by taking care of maintenance costs on those is providing a substantial savings also because we're getting the cost efficiencies again.
Question on that. Would they be a larger potential on volume on some of these service contracts or maintenance contracts if we included the big user, Galax Grayson in it too, and combined that?
There's certainly a possibility for that.
Because I know they got that. They got that too.
Yeah, that's a question we can certainly ask.
Talk to Jason.
I'll talk to him. What we got? Okay, compensable reimbursement is the same as it was for fire, except we're using the numbers for Galax Grayson EMS instead of for Galax Fire. The vehicle fee refunds, that's the one we talked about as currently being on the desk of the county attorney for review so that we can write an appropriate ordinance under the current guidelines to take care of that. It's 3,500. So that 3,500 was, quite frankly, a placeholder based on the last time this was actually used, which has been several years now. So we don't really know what it's going to look like. It's the best data we have. The emergency operations or the declaration line, in the past, we've had a $10,000 line for that. It's very arbitrary. It's basically assuming that you're going to have an emergency where we do a declaration. And even then, $10,000 doesn't mean anything. If we have an emergency that requires a declaration, then the costs are going to be whatever they are. We don't need a line item to be established for something that may happen. So we zeroed that out. If we have a declared emergency, then we just deal with it on a case-by-case basis. The dues and membership, if you don't mind expanding that out for me, please. These are basically just professional dues for Philip and myself. Those are primarily mine. So ICMA, the Virginia Emergency Management Association, and the Virginia Fire Chiefs. They do provide support to us through these memberships, and they also make me better able to do my job. The aid to locality and the 4 for Life are both passed through from the state. We base the AT of the aid to locality number is based on 2022 data, and that's simply because we don't have anything newer than that. The 4 for Life is based on 2023 data, but of course we still don't know what the actual allocation will be for 24. So that's the best data that we have. That money is passed directly through to the agencies. We account for it to make sure that it's spent on the things that are legal, if you will. But aside from that, it goes directly back to the agencies. Office supplies is pretty straightforward, and that is flat. But that was a little bit high last year. We had to buy some furniture, so we don't anticipate going over $1,500 this year. Our biggest expense, other than furniture, is paper. Meeting supplies and sustenance, we provide the ability for agencies that are hosting meetings in support of our emergency services operations. We have a fund there so that they can draw from that if they need help providing a meal for a meeting or something like that. We haven't done it, but it's also there if we have a major event and we want to ship food out to the providers while they're in the field, we can use it for that also.
Did that other ops supply line exist last year?
It did, sir. And it's the
Same
same,
amount?
it's the same amount. We spent more than that last year because of the furniture, but it was the same amount. It was budgeted.
So 42K flat. It says down 30%. Is that because you're not buying furniture? Is that what you said?
That's down from what we actually spent, not.
You're talking about 2 different line items.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry, I'm just gonna interpret.
Thank
He's ahead of you. He skipped down already to other operational supplies.
Oh, I thought you were there. My bad.
No.
My bad.
He's in office supplies.
Yeah, my bad.
Okay. No, it's me. I need to keep my blue line where it needs to be.
Yeah, I'm just getting used to the new presentation, so it's not your fault.
I need to remember to bring my glasses because I'm trying to see. Thanks, Mitch. I think I'll pass. The fuel is just an extrapolation based on the fuel I've used in my vehicle. That obviously is not gonna be 100% accurate. The URV, the quick response vehicle, depending on usage, it may be similar to mine, it may be more, but that's the best, it gave us a good starting place. Uniforms are based on two things. So we did request $1,800 per person for the two new positions, and that basically gets them all the PPE they need and the uniforms. And it also included $400 per year for staff that are already under employment. Which we're still new enough that we don't have a good feel for that yet, but that allows for a pair of boots and replacement of certain items. Mostly the stuff that we use out in the field. Other operational supplies. This is again a new breakdown for this. What we're looking at, one of the big things that we're doing this year that we have not done in the past, we started providing PPE for the county during COVID, and that continues. Unfortunately, the costs for that have been extremely low because we got a lot of stuff from the federal government and the state government. But now we're going to start buying EMS consumables. So the bandaging, the soft goods that they use to equip the ambulance, we're going to start purchasing those under a county umbrella so that it saves money for the agencies. Right now, if Freeze needs bandaging material, they have to buy a case of bandaging material, and so does every other agency. And that's crazy expensive when you start looking at some of the things that they have to have on the trucks. If we buy them at the county level, then the county would buy a case, and that may be enough for all of our agencies for a good amount of time. And it also allows us to do cost efficiencies with it. And the other thing we can do, if it's beneficial to us, because we're a jurisdiction and not an independent agency, for larger scale items, I can tag on to other jurisdictional contracts. The hazmat consumables is much lower. We only ask for $2,000 there, and that is basically to replace consumables for hazardous materials incidents if needed. We have not had to do that in the last couple of years because the contractor that has been selected by the entities that have needed a contracted service, most of them call Gil Rippey in this area, and he provides this at no fund or no cost to our agencies. So in that case, we won't need that money, but I need to have a line for it just in case we end up with a different contractor. Equipment, excuse me. The equipment line here, the grant programs, is for grant matches. We currently have no grant matches planned for next fiscal year. So that's zeroed out. That is a placeholder for future years when we know that we're going to purchase equipment that's conditional under grant acceptance. Operational EMS equipment, if you'd expand that one for me. This is another one that is zeroed out currently, but we're going to be collecting the data on it. This is basically to determine costs that we're spending on ALS, advanced life support equipment, basic life support equipment, and then personal protective equipment. I want to be able to gain data on those particular lines so we can better budget for them in the future and have a more realistic idea of what they're going to cost. Right now, all of those costs are coming out of the front end of the compensable reimbursement, and that's why it's zeroed out. And we'll continue to do that for this budget cycle with the possibility that we'll shift in future budget years. Communications equipment is simply purchase of one portable radio this year. That is, again, for the addition of the ALS augment position. That radio will be passed from individual to individual, so we don't need more than one right now.
Can I ask a question real fast?
Yes, sir.
This is for Lisa. Is there any way you can make that a little bigger? No,
I'm sorry.
I'm getting whiplash. And I can't.
I have it at maximized,
Good job.
as large as possible. I apologize.
That's all right. That's
The fleet vehicle, the requests here are based on the approval of the board's last year continuing apparatus purchases. So if you look at the fire apparatus, last year the board approved purchase of an ambulance 1 year alternating with 400,000 towards a fire apparatus next year. We do not, Lisa, that's an error, I'm sorry. The ambulance apparatus, the EMS apparatus should be zeroed out because we're not purchasing one of those this year.
That's, remember we discussed it, that needs to be carried over, and that's for me.
Okay,
That's for me.
that is money that's in this year's budget that's gonna be carried over to that. It's not an additional ask. That
That is a
225,000.
carryover expense.
Says FY 23.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Now, the 400,000 is an ask for this fiscal year, and we've had several discussions, and they've been entertaining, and there's been a lot of discussion about how we want to actually use that 400,000. For purposes of the budget meeting today, we are all in agreement that the 400,000, which is actually, we found that was actually supposed to be 450. There's concurrence on the part of the Emergency Services Commission and myself, and everybody who else has been part of this process, that the 400,000 number is what we need. We are still working on the mechanism that we use for that distribution, and we may recommend changes over what we did for the ambulance last year. My suggestion is that we continue the discussion. We need to add some more people to that discussion, including the county administration, and possibly members of the board if they choose to participate. But I don't think the commission at this point is really at the point where they want to say how we want to spend it yet.
So the ask is 400.
The ask is 400, and then we'll get down in the grass and figure out how we're going to do the distribution later.
So since you got the fire chiefs here, are they gonna give us some input on their recommendation, or is that?
Getting away?
Just kind of get an idea of what's been talked around.
As the chief met, and we've discussed numerous times, we've all, as a group, have come to agree that we feel like it's more beneficial rather than purchasing one fire truck at a time, split the money 6 ways and let each fire department purchase and and have that money, and it must be used for purchase of a vehicle. And even, I guess, probably up to the time limit on that as well. But in your market, money to be used, purchase a vehicle, and each department could benefit right away rather than whoever's at the tail end of this cycle has to wait 12 years to get a truck. If we split it 6 ways, we can start immediately replacing trucks countywide, not just one at a time. And that's, I don't know any other way to put it, but that.
Each community could benefit from the 400,000 every time it was applied, whether we got it every year or every 2 years. It'd either be 33,000 or 66,000 for those 6 agencies. Then that would let us as agencies lease or buy a truck, and then we would know that we were going to have this much money coming from you guys that we would pay on our payment. And if we needed to expand that amount of money, then we would have the amount of time a year, if we've done it yearly, to have fundraisers to add to that money to be able to pay for a truck. The basic cab over truck now, bumper is somewhere between $550,000 and $600,000. So 400, we would have to, as partners, make up a whole lot of extra money to help pay for it, but that wouldn't be no issue. You was talking about retention and stuff and then to go to be able to get firefighters, young firefighters, and people from the community. If they didn't have to sell hot dogs, hamburgers, do pillars, conventions, all the things that we have to do to be able to pay for this truck, it would make everybody want to come and be there and be part of it and run calls. And it would help a great deal on having raised money to buy these pieces of equipment. And all 6 of us chiefs that we talk to need a truck right now. 20 years, they go out of compliance with ISO. Ours is a 2000 model, so, and actually it needs to be right now. Gary's, and the others around are in the same boat, you know. But if we could get this money divided up equally to where we could go ahead and purchase a truck, lease a truck or whatever, and we knew we had money coming to pay for it with, we could go ahead and order our trucks. And the other thing on this is the people who have homeowners insurance are gonna go squat. Because when our trucks go out of ISO compliance, homeowners policies is gonna go up dramatically. So, just asking that you guys, divide it up equally, so each community is gonna get the very same amount, be used. The tax money will be coming to each community. And they can't say, well, this community got something we didn't. And this no here will say, well, we need to get worse than somebody else did. And that, I think, if you guys see it in your hearts, will let us have it equally and let us, we've done it for, Freeze was established in 61, and some of the others are a little older than us. But we have bought and worked through fundraisers and builders conventions and all different things. We have been stewards of the equipment and took care of it and made sure it was there and maintained it and run it and covered the people in the community's needs. So, Gary.
Well,
Sounds good.
I'll chime in if I may, since I'm sitting on the Bureau's commission. I think it's a great idea. There's a lot of details still need to be, I guess, ironed out with administration, and that's the commission's recommendation. I'm sure this board to support that. But we probably would need some kind of MOU in case down the line times got tougher for the county and we couldn't give what we're committing to at this point. There's details, but that's what you guys do as far as the admin and all that. But I'm gonna try and get into that and figure that out for you, but I think that you guys have presented pretty sound idea.
Mr. Fink?
So Randy, now I'll come to Gary. You said sounds like you got one vehicle that's already out of ISO compliance now, right?
Well, we've got 3 now.
You got 3 that's out.
Yeah.
That was my question. How many? So you got 3. How many do you have?
Just have one right now.
So in the next 2 years, this being the first year coming up in June, before you get the next allocation of funds, how many more vehicles are you gonna have out of compliance?
Oh,
Does that make sense what I'm asking? You got 3 out right now.
yeah.
That's an immediate.
If we've got one that is in compliance, then the others can still be used and, just like they was before, but you got to have that one that is compliant.
When's that one run out? Is it in the next 2 to 3 years?
Yes, sir. It's a 2000 model. So it's, is it 25 years now?
25, I believe.
So we're in 23.
So in
and-
2 years, you're gonna be out.
Actually, by the time we could get one, if we.
Well, if you
right
get a
now,
new
it'd
one,
be,
if you get a new one, that's probably a lead time of 18 to 24 months. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
fair?
32 to 36.
Okay. And then Gary, same, are you in as bad a shape or not?
No.
Not-
We actually.
I don't mean to say you're in bad shape.
We actually just bought a truck to take care of that, just recently, actually used truck, 2019. Took care of that, but we still have our tanker to contend with. It actually failed the pump test, so we gotta take some action on that now.
As far as the homeowner's issue with the insurance, as long as you have one,
Mhm.
that
That covers it. I would say, I'm not exactly sure, I'm not an insurance agent, but I would say everybody's homeowner's insurance throughout the county for everybody who had a truck that was out of compliance would probably be somewhere around 40%, I would guess.
So in that one vehicle, it could be a tanker, it could be a brush truck, it could be a pump.
No, it has to be a pumper,
So you gotta
certified.
have a pump.
Yeah.
That's current.
That is current and up to NFPA standards.
Thanks.
Just a new fire truck cost, new pumper cost. Not trying to drill you, I'm just trying to figure out, if we split it 6 ways, is there gonna be enough money per agency to handle the note on it annually? And of course,
33,000, if you bought a $600,000 truck, I don't have enough calculator with me, $600,000 truck, and you paid 40,000 a year on it for 10 years, that'd be 400,000, and that's where we would have to make up the difference to pay the payment. Each individual agency would do fundraisers to help make up
well,
the difference.
that's what is scary to me is, I think it's a great idea. Let every agency get something new on the books right now. But what this board decides, the next 2, 3, 4 boards are gonna have to continue with that commitment.
Yes, sir. That was the
to
next
ensure-
thing I was gonna bring up.
And that's, I think we've kind of made the commitment, that we would do it for the next, 12 years or whatever it was. But to do this, and I think it's a great way to do it. One, make sure that the agencies are getting enough money to cover their payments every year.
Right.
And then 2, ensure that this board always supports that, so you don't have to sell the hot dogs and the hamburgers. You do it because you want to,
Right.
not because you have to. So that's, whatever that number ends up being is what I think the number needs to be in the budget
Okay.
to be able to afford a pumper for every agency.
Well, does everybody need a pumper, or is there just like 3 of the 6 need a pumper and a couple need something different?
I think Rugby needs a pumper. Mount Rogers,
Elk Creek, but Mount Rogers does.
Mount Rogers, and I think Troutdale does. We do. Elk Creek, I'm almost sure.
So in light of what Mr. Ivy said, I guess if we base the give on a pumper, we'd be safe. Is that what?
Well, yeah, but when everybody doesn't need a pumper, but they may need a brush truck, but it doesn't take whatever that is, $60,000
If I
to
can make
every agency.
a general comment too, one of the goals that I've had, by increasing the amount of funding that we're providing for the agencies through centralized contracting and providing the expenses that they have been having to pay out of their pockets, we're freeing up some money too, that they're gonna be able to use for things like truck payments, or building improvements and things like that. So all of this kind of works towards the same direction, if you understand what I'm saying. It doesn't replace the need for the county to support, it just kind of helps us all kind of go in the same direction, if you will.
I'll throw out another idea. I mean, my understanding from like, Rugby was there, and I think Mount Rogers too, and you mentioned that you all were tanker, you mentioned the tanker. I know they need tankers. I don't know about their pump truck, but if you gotta have a pump truck, I don't know how, that's a critical deal in order to maintain the insurance and all that. So maybe entertain the idea that, yeah, we're gonna play around with this big number, but at the commission level, if Freeze needs a pumper because they're gonna lose their certification, and we need to get the amount of money they need to cover for the next 2 years, that payment for that pumper. But Gary may not need a pumper for 3 or 4 years, but he needs a brush truck. So the amount of money that independents may get in this, if we go with this idea of distribution, these block grants may actually be a different number per agency based on the need for the next 2 years. So you can buy the piece of equipment you need versus buy everybody get the same lump sum. You know what I mean? Because I know there's a need for tanker in the western end. I don't know about the pumper deal, but anyway, and I'm not trying to solve the problem. I just, something to think about. I'm in favor of trying to give you all whatever you need to be successful.
And there's another issue that we could do, and we've talked about, is going to rural development and see if we can get some grant money
Amen.
there.
You're
Yeah,
telling-
no problem.
I was gonna mention the exact same thing.
We've done that before in the past. We bought a tanker and a truck, brush truck through rural development when I was chief the other time, and they paid part of it, and then they financed it for us and at a low rate, and then we paid it off. So that is another option that we can go after. But, you know, if you guys can help us all, we can all go to rural development and apply for grants and see what we get.
And leasing is a much more available option now for fire apparatus than it used to be, so it's a complicated problem,
No, I
and
get it.
there's a lot of options.
Is it possible to structure this in such a way that every agency gets X amount of dollars every year, but it has to be spent towards an apparatus or a vehicle or whatever we call it? That, because it's just like there's going to be talk in the community that Independence got a bumper and we got a darn brush truck. That's just the way it works. But if we truly are going to be equitable to all of our agencies and give whatever the number is, that number has to be able to cover a pump truck payment. That every agency gets that every year, specifically earmarked for apparatuses. That when the time comes up that Independence does need a pumper, they've got 3 years worth of $62,000 sitting there that they know that they're going to be able to cover for the next 3 years. It's still going to require a commitment from this board from now on. But, I mean, that will make our agencies more resilient all the way across the county. So I really like the idea of putting it in the agency's hands and allowing them to get specifically what they need for their community.
In that line, they just bought a pumper, what, how old's yours?
When we just talked 2019.
Okay, so they have a pumper payment, so that could go toward their pumper payment, and then whatever they're using for the pumper payment, they can put on their brush. So we don't have to dive into all that, but just give them all the same. So so it's not like Mr. Ivy said, they're getting a pumper and they're getting a brush truck and.
Let's let each agency be in control of what they need, because the needs of Mount Rogers are going to be different than the needs in Freeze. And
yeah,
and we put our trust and support behind those agencies in their area to use the money where they need to use it.
And I would assume that we do the same for EMS, just the same, whatever we do here in fire, that we do that same to make it simple. So
that's a good point. So moving forward, because we just was involved with the, getting a rescue squad or ambulance for Baywood Rescue. We need to figure out how to adjust that so we can apply this same formula to the ambulances and the EMS, if that's doable.
Well, the same formula to me is have the ambulance chief come and talk to us and see, because an ambulance is different than a fire truck. And the replacement timeline is probably quicker than a fire truck. And so the rapidity, whatever the word I'm looking for, that turnover there is something we need to understand better before we make this commitment to FY 24-25.
Mr. Van, when we done the survey and study for the ambulances for the county, we was on a board, a group survey. And what we done is went through and looked at the age of every ambulance and the mileage and who had the newest, and took them out of the equation and brought it down to Freeze had the newest. So we're going to be several years before we'll be in the line for an ambulance. And we've got another backup ambulance that is good. Okay, so then Elk Creek had fairly new equipment. Independence did. So it came down between Mount Rogers and Baywood, and Mount Rogers had just spent $5,000 on their unit to get some repairs done. Baywoods was completely out of commission and they were using Independence, one of theirs, because rear end came out, they didn't want to spend no money. So that's how we come up with who got the ambulances during that, work study. But, but I agree with, keeping the ambulances in the.
Oh, yeah, and I'm not opposed to what we're talking about on the fire side for the ambulance too. I just think we need to look at it with the folks.
I just want to give you an idea
Yeah.
of how we come up with what we did.
No, I support it.
The only question I had, I think you answered it almost. It's the idea that we would get a loan from who? From a loan just from a loan from someone. USDA.
Yeah.
And those are easily, each individual would apply for those.
Yeah, that's what it's for. It's for rural development and protection and stuff. It's not only for fire apparatus or anything. It could be for police cars. It could be for school. I don't know if they could get school buses through it or not.
If I may,
Go ahead.
we're actually just closed to a grant last week for 2 police cars. We have purchased a trash truck. Via that. The county could actually be the applicant for that particular loan. And pass that on to the agencies.
We'll charge for that.
There's no application.
Usually they charge a 5%. That's a good number.
It is a good number. It's a, a good word. It's a lot of paperwork involved, but it's worth it.
Well, it's just what you gotta do, we can make a flat tax, right?
Yes, and we have great support staff from USDA, both in the Whitville office and the Abingdon office. Not Abingdon, Lebanon office.
Big fan of 1%.
Unless it's your savings account.
Additionally, I want to throw this mechanism of how this could work. I just want to throw this particular idea out there from the finance side. This could be done, and you guys pay attention. I don't know that I can repeat this or if I'll be here to repeat it, but what they're talking about could be done very much like the pass-through with the aid locality and the 4 for Life. Hey, you turn in your loan payments, you pay it, you turn in, your proof of payment, will reimburse you. I think that would be a really good mechanism to go with that memorandum of understanding to make sure that the money is allocated properly. Yes. I just want to throw that out there. Not really the place to talk about that, but I
Glad
just
you
wanted
threw
to
it out. That's good to know.
get it out there that could be a mechanism of doing that pretty easily.
Check.
Okay.
The last item on mine is, operations equipment, that's miscellaneous equipment, use it device, scene lighting, and things like that. So it's not something I can identify and say this is what I'm gonna use it for, but it gives me a very small amount of money that I can use to meet, needs as they approach, as they come up.
And that's a new ask.
No, it's actually, we had that last year.
Am I looking at the right line? 40,000,
No, it's, 2024.
40,000, $1,500 1,500% increase?
Oh, wait a minute. No, I need
Is that-
my notes. No, that's what
Is
the,
You could tell me that I'm reading it wrong, but I'm not.
that's it. I thought that was, the 4,000.
Oh, 4?
I
Okay.
think
Well,
that's
it may have been just a typo.
Wow, yeah.
Here, we can fix
Say
that.
36,000.
There you go, 4,000. Easy. That happens. We're
Okay.
human.
You got a 60% increase and you made us feel good.
We just paid for a fire truck.
So this represents a significant increase in last year's ask, and we recognize that. We appreciate your consideration. We think that the work that all of us have done together is pretty well represented in what the ask is, and we think that there's nothing that we're asking for that doesn't benefit the citizenry. So thank you for your time. If there are any more questions, any of us?
Just compared to last year, this is last year, correct?
Not the bottom number, no, sir.
No, like show them the go top and show them the top
Okay.
line. So they can see what he's looking for.
Gotcha. Now, remember, you gotta really subtract out 225,000, okay? Keep that in your mind. This line here. So it's kind of grayed out, but it is
1.46, 1.47.
it's about $600,000 more. Because the ambulance has to come off.
The ambulance has to come on.
The ambulance has to come off.
And the ask for the fire apparatus is, what, 175,000 more. And the positions are a big chunk of that, obviously.
And you're not asking for vehicles for those two positions.
No,
So you're just asking for two bodies.
They'll be all using the same vehicle, they'll be turned over on a shift rotation.
And the 75,000 for the physicals is
And
in
then
this file. And I don't know. I'm gonna ask this question at the risk of sounding not very smart, but what if, is those physicals, is that something that our local primary care providers could help us with if we were to reach out to them, or do they have to be a certain type of?
They can do the
Certified.
medical physical, they probably would not do the respiratory physical. And the reason for that is they have to do the lung function testing, and there's a couple of things that go into that most doctors' offices just don't have. It's specialized equipment, it's specialized training, but the actual medical physical probably, certainly that's a possibility. It would be easier to manage if it's under one provider, but we can work with that.
That just might be an area where we might.
I don't think we'll get a better rate from anybody. The rate that they gave us is based on volume, and I think that's about it. It's actually came out much less than I expected.
Well, I guess my line of thinking is we as a county gave 60,000 for an X-ray machine for the new healthcare facility. And it might be that they could help facilitate that and cut that 75 way down. Just a thought.
because of the amount, our estimate is at 75,000. This will have to go through procurement. So that, it's not a hard and fast number. Could be a little less, could be a little more, but this is at least a target that we have.
And it's also based on maximum participation, which quite frankly, we won't have. So there'll be people who choose not to do it.
To that point, we're gonna have tri-area and freeze and in Grant.
Right.
So we got eastern and western end.
Yeah, that's a conversation we can have with,
They can do chest X-ray, but I don't know, like I said, I don't know what's required in OSHA. I just wanted to throw that out there.
the respiratory piece is specialized, the rest of it's not.
That was one question.
Sure.
You mentioned that med direction is $9,000.
Yes, sir.
You also said that different agencies have chosen not to have a singular med director. Are they paying that on their own?
That's a good question, and it depends on their operational medical director. Some charge fees, some don't. I'm not sure. I can't speak for any of the other OMDs.
Okay.
But
that's all we're paying for med direction.
that's all we're paying for anybody who wants to participate. We did not, we intentionally did not make it a mandatory requirement.
The doc would cover everybody.
Not only is he covering everybody who wants to participate, but the services, the general services he's providing, the training, the QA, and things like that, he's offered up even for the agencies that he's not covering. So he's,
And Paul, help me if I'm on this too. I think there was a few of the agencies that had someone they had traditionally used, and they just chose to stick with them. But they understand, because I've already explained over and over, they are welcome to participate if they so choose. So that's kind of the thing on that.
thanks, Paul. Thanks, sir.
Thanks, guys, appreciate it.
Thank you,
I
gentlemen.
love you for listening to us.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you all.
You wanna take a 5-10 minute break, and we'll get back.
Stanley,
Let me go to the rest of the home, y'all.
good. They were looking at the schedule for the fire marshal.
Ben, how we doing?
Good.
Hey, young lady, how are you?
We made it like the end. Good, yeah.
They want to get around. I don't know if we'll. It'll take too long. We wanted a lot of that during the
That's a lot of stuff to
absorb.
Say,
Yeah, elaborate more on what we spoke about prior, and then what do we think we can do best in the next coming
Yes,
fiscal
we'll go
year?
through.
Well, a lot of this
The
stuff
rest
is
of
running numbers.
You'll see on
too,
the
just-
screen, you've got jail, juvenile justice, sheriff's
That
office,
is your
day
budget
one.
to the next, I guess.
Yeah, that's part of it. Also, there's a request, I'll have an increase on.
How you doing?
Capability at the county level, that's about 300,000 of that.
Good, you?
But some of it is, but these departments are asking what they think.